Helpy, welcome to my space. Try something different tonight. I'm going to read from a book I wrote a few moons ago, Men in the Desert. I had it printed, and I gave copies to all my friends, and I don't think a single one of them read it. So I'm going to start reading it to you. Man in the Desert, a funny little trip. He slept in the desert among scorpions and snakes and shook out his boots for good measure. Then he yawned and he scratched and he stood and he stretched and wandered away at his pleasure. The goats followed suit, unfolded themselves, bowed their spines like a Halloween cat, scampering like bugs and whistling peats, happily following the man in the hat. They skirted the orchards of prickly pear and the shores of dry lakes, I am told, until they came to a place long forgotten and uncovered a treasure of gold. There was a man who carried a fire extinguisher into the desert. It was polished red with chrome handle. He had two goats that followed him while pretending not to notice him, as goats will do. During long siestas under the mesquite and overhangs of the dry riverbeds, groups of small tan men and women sometimes hear strange laughter spilling across the dry, hot expanses of the southwest New Mexico as their nervous migration leads them to greener pastures. These travelers would cross themselves and whisper promises to the Virgin as desperate people will do. An army green belt with brass buckle was tied with baling twine to the neck of the shiny red fire extinguisher. Just before the gauge that read fully charged and was slung across his shoulder, the goats, an old brown and a white male known as Buck and Billy, and a young fawn, a white female called a doe, would sample with starts and stops, hors d'oeuvres offered up by the nourishment of the landscape. Together they randomly wandered towards emergent points of interest, at times stopping and staring at nothing, everything, contemplating the curvature of the earth, as wanderers often do. The man and sometimes the goats would dine on dried fruit and mixed nuts. The man and not the goats also enjoyed sardines and jerky of suspicious origins. They drank from isolated springs that surfaced for a quick breath of desert air before disappearing immediately beneath the desert back into the netherworld. This he drowned with fermented grapefruit juice stored in a leather body bag carried in pouches, seemingly without notice by the young doe. The buck would suffer no such indignity, and he will leave his companion without this nectar the first chance he got, this being the disposition of billy goats. As the eastern sky erupted nuclear, disappearing beyond the horizon, and the trickster coyote teased the moon into a chase across the sky, the descendants of ancient pilgrims focused on the next leg of their journey with knapsacks of tortillas, canned peaches, Twinkies, and plastic jugs of water. Becoming lighter by the hour, they head into the moonscape with dull thoughts full of worry and hope. The decision on where and when to stop was made by consensus between the weather-beaten, bearded, sandy-haired man with laughing blue eyes and the buck, who was either very wise or suffered reoccurring hallucinations. He would stop and bleat curses at the strange man, jump around as if fire ants were filleting his testicles, then stop again, legs splayed with his head pointed towards the sky and the top lip curled back. At the end of this demonstration, he would shake his head until his droopy ears slapped his face, fold himself up, close his eyes, and pretend to sleep. The man concurred, set his fire extinguisher down carefully, his backpack down casually, and unburdened the doe. Having been relieved of this burden, her tiny hooves would sprout wings, and she would explode in various directions, her back end trying to move without regard to her front end, until she was literally only several yards away and completely lost. In a panic, she cried pitifully, using 2 octaves instead of 1, until the old Billy raised his head and bleated orders for her to get her silly ass back over here. Shaking out an old woolen army blankets, the man spread it across a semi-flat piece of the estate. He set himself down and lit up a handmade cheroot, leaned back against his backpack, and smiled with his entire body. More to come.